kind of big things that I learned about uh, while I was down there that really informed a lot about my future. The first is related to my roots. I learned a lot about where I came from, my grandparents, how their journeys were. Uh, and then the second was the difference between a first world and third world country. So I took those experiences and then brought them back to finish high school and college. But to tell you a little bit more about some of those experiences, the first one around my roots is I really got to learn about um, how my mom grew up was like super humble country kind of uh, growing up. This is actually a cartoonized photo of my grandparents' old house where my mom grew up, um, which I actually printed it out and I have it here in my house just to always kind of remind me of, this is where my family's from, and to always like keep me grounded. I also think it looks pretty cool. Um, so that's one thing that really stood out. A second is around work. So my grandpa has always like raised cattle, and even till this day, he's retired. He still does it. And a quote that I always remember from him is that like work is fun. Like you always should be working. And like his passion and energy that he puts into his craft, which is raising cows and dedicated to the land, is something that I always remember because it's like when you put your passion and your energy into something, it doesn't really feel like a burden. And if when I think about him putting his passion and energy underneath a really hot sun, then it should be a lot simpler for me to do it in a computer screen, in air conditioning and in heat. So that's something that I always take back. Another one that I learned was around my dad. So growing up, my dad, like as a kid, actually cleaned shoes at the park um, to help his family make a living. And my dad went on to put himself through college and to work in a professional environment in the Dominican Republic within accounting. But learning about how his childhood was so different than mine, how he had to actually go out and work was like, wow, like I, I have no reason to not be able to make progress if all of the things that he went through, I'm in such a better place. So that's something that I took away from that. Then another part related to the roots was that a big decision that my parents made was after they got married and I was almost arriving, they decided that I was going to be born in New York. And my dad didn't have papers yet. So my mom actually had me by herself in New York. And now as a parent, I know how hard it is to like take care of a newborn. So that was sort of like the first big decision that they made that informed how I grew up. And then the last one that kind of stood out for me was that, as parents, my dad, went from that childhood all the way through putting himself through school. And then he gave all of that up to like move to the US to start a new family, or to start our lives here. And so as I learned that always kind of stuck in the back of my head as like, wow, you give, if what your parents give you so much, I think it's up to me to like return that, not just by trying really hard at whatever I was going to dedicate my life to. The other part, which is around the difference between first world and third world country. So there's a lot of the basic necessities, as you guys probably know, sometimes are super different. So this is a common theme in VR, se fue la luz, things like electricity and the different socioeconomic levels. I got to experience firsthand, which was pretty eye-opening. Going along with that, the types of jobs and the types of work that people would need to have were kind of ad hoc. Um, and so this entrepreneurial nature, entrepreneurial spirit really uh, was present. But despite all of the different challenges, um, everyone was overall like very happy. So a lot happier than some of the experiences that I've had in the U.S. So the neighbors share, they play games together, and so I kind of took away this notion of mal tiempo buena cara, so meaning for bad times you can still smile, pretty much. Um, so those were, some of the key experiences and takeaways that while I was growing up informed sort of my worldview and how I approached school and college and career. Um, then I came back to the U.S. to finish high school at Elizabeth High School, and learned I had to go take SATs to get into college and all that stuff, and so I had to kind of work quickly to get all my ducks in a row to get into college. And then that's where I went to Rutgers Newark. But before getting into my experience at Rutgers and what all of these things mean here on this page, I wanted to pause really quick in case you guys had any questions or anything.
There's one question in the chat box, Joelle, is when you went back to Elizabeth, did you find that it was diverse? Because we have a lot of scholars on the phone that grew up in either places like Hudson County where it's really diverse, or they grew up in places where there was little diversity when they were growing up. So we're just curious to know, how did you find your experience in Elizabeth?
Yeah, so Elizabeth was diverse in the sense of there were a lot of different people from Hispanic communities. There's a big Haitian community, African American, some Caucasian. In the sense of like compared to as I learned in the future, like the overall U.S., it was very diverse. I think the main difference that I kind of had to get used to as I like went on professionally was that the community that I grew up in and that I was exposed to didn't reflect like the professional environment community. And so that was like a big thing for me because I found myself a lot of times like, and even to this day, like I connect a lot with um, like the people that even like the janitors and the people that work behind the kitchen at the office, like all that kind of stuff, because they're like more a part of my community. They're closer to the community that I grew up in. So I'd say yes, definitely very diverse, but very different than like a corporate environment. And so that's something that through time I've had to learn to like just feel comfortable and be okay with operating in an environment that is just very different than the environment that I grew up in and where I went to school in.
Follow-up question. We've actually talked about this with a couple of previous Café con Joe's guests that have expressed similar feelings in terms of, even if you grew up in a place that's diverse, once you enter corporate America or once you enter your career, you kind of find yourself being a minority, even more so than when you were growing up. So I'm curious to know, like, when you first started your career or even now, like, did you ever find yourself changing the way you talk or kind of like muting your Dominican Republic attributes or accents or anything like that, or just diminishing your culture a little bit in order to help you in that during the early part of your career?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question, and I think it's like it's one that like every person needs to find their own balance in what it is that they're comfortable with and what it is that they're trying to achieve. Um, for me, like one of the things that's super important to me is being authentic. And authentic to who I am. And so I've been able to, throughout my career, um, always like maintain that authenticity because it's super important to me. And if I'm in a place where I can't be authentic and like then that's not the place for me. Now that doesn't mean that I show up at work every day and I'm like de lo mío, que lo que? Like no, that's not how Um, but that does mean that when I talk to my colleagues about what I'm passionate about, or like, yeah, I talk to them about, hey, there's this, do you know like J Balvin and Bad Bunny, and like, oh, I listen to this music, and I really enjoy this type of coffee and that kind of stuff. And I found that typically people are very much like interested in other people, and when people feel a genuineness and an authenticity coming from you, um, like they open up and they start to like share more about themselves. And so, yeah, I mean, I think how I've approached it is I'm always gonna be like authentic to myself as it relates to like the work and being professional and how I show up. That's separate from that's not necessarily like cultural, right? Because in any work environment, you should show up how that profession shows up. And I'd say I never let like my Dominicanness overpower my marketing ability, right? Because if in my career what I'm doing is marketing, then that's what should shine, the actual work. But in terms of like who I am as a person, I've leaned into just being authentic. And I think you'll see as I talk through more about some of my professional experiences that has actually opened up different opportunities for me. And I've been able to like weave in my own personal interests and my own culture into what I do at work too.
Great, thank you so much for answering those questions.
Yeah. So there's a lot on this page, so I'm gonna spend a little bit on here because there's at least one story that was kind of like a curveball that got thrown to me in college, or a couple. So the first is, so I went into school with the plan to get into accounting, which I eventually did, for the purpose of always having a good career and good work, because that was like my main focus. It wasn't about what I cared about. And so that's the track that I was on. And after 2 years, the, uh, the accounting department had approached me and was like, if you change your major to outside of accounting into a non-business major, like economics, I can get you into this MBA program for accounting, and it can be a dual degree. You can get a bachelor's in something else and do an MBA in accounting, and you'll be done in 4.5 years. And I was like, wow, like what's the catch? There wasn't really a catch. I mean, the only thing that did happen was that I think his daughter was also going through that program. So I guess he was looking for more people to get into it. But anyway, I was like, okay, yes. So after sophomore year, I agreed to change my major to economics and do like all the economics coursework in 2 semesters. And I found that like I really liked economics. So this book that I put here, Free Economics, where an economist explores the hidden side of everything, it kind of just showcases how you can apply economic thinking to everyday situations and everyday scenarios. And I think that helped frame my the way that I think about things, and how do you analyze human behavior, what drives people's decision making. There's a lot of like great things that I think economics provides in terms of like a tool set for your brain to be able to analyze stuff. So that was good. While I was in the economics trajectory, an economics professor approached me and was like, "Hey, do you want to participate in the Federal Reserve Challenge? You can get credits if you want, but you're doing good in class, and it's essentially a challenge where you compete against other universities and you propose actions that the Federal Reserve would do. Like you pretend to be the Federal Reserve." So I agreed to it. I didn't need the credits at the time, but I was like, okay, professor, you're asking me, I'll go for it. Fast forward, while I was after doing all of that stuff a year later, and the MBA program was finishing, the head of the MBA program was like, Joel, you don't have enough undergrad credits. Because the classes that you put in there, like we can't double count this class or whatever. There was like a mix up. And I was like, oh my gosh, like how am I gonna, like, what do you mean I don't have enough credits? Like this is impossible. I sent you all of my classes. And then while I was having that discussion, I thought back to like, oh wow, the professor that asked me to participate in this challenge said I could get credits. It's been like a year. It sounds like I need some credits. So I called that professor up right away and I'm like, Professor Graham, I need some credits for that. And he was like, Joel, no problem. 3 credits, an A, you got it. It'll be in the system in like a day or so. And I was like, wow, that literally like saved me for like another semester that I would have had to take another class. I didn't have to pay for the credits. And it was really just because when the professor reached out to ask me to help him and participate, I was like, yes, without even knowing that I would need him in the future. And so that was just one lesson around that. When people ask of you, I always think about, how can I say yes? How can I actually do this and make this happen? And so that helped me, graduate in time with undergrad and grad school. And then the other piece that's on here that I always take away from my college experience was being an RA, because it really just it felt good to be able to influence and impact people outside of school and give them guidance and all that kind of stuff. So that was my undergrad and grad school experience. And if you guys have any questions or thought or want to talk about anything going through school, we can definitely.
I know we have an economics double major on the call, and Afra, I'm going to call you out real quick to see if you want to talk a little bit about your experience studying economics at Seton Hall.
Sure. Let me get my camera on. Can you see me? Okay, perfect. So my economics adventure began in my sophomore year. I'm a diplomacy major, and I was just going with diplomacy, and then I realized that having an economics major will be perfect as a double major to complement the diplomacy, because, as you also mentioned, economics is something I also enjoy. And I think in the future, what I want to do is something that will be related to both of my majors. And you also mentioned the MBA program, and I'm planning to apply. Actually got accepted from the MBA program. I don't know when I will be joining, attending the school, but yeah, it's such an inspiring that I heard it from you and how you use that major, like the MBA, and became where you are right now.
Nice. Yeah. And what are you what are your thoughts on the future career that you plan to go into, or areas is it public sector, private sector? Are there questions in your head about that?
I want to do something related to both. I'm from Turkey, Istanbul, Turkey, actually. So I want to do something international between both countries. And with that, I need diplomacy and in United Nations involved. So I need UN and the economics background for that. So for now, it's too, right now, my plans are kind of constantly changing. And due to COVID-19 also. So I have like backup plans. Well, if this happens. But in the end, I want to do something international, and I will need the econ background for that too.
Nice. Yeah, there's definitely like a long like journey and trajectory through everything. My brother actually, while he was in school, he was very much into diplomacy. Um, he did, what's it called? There's like a UN college chapter of like where you go and you're like a panel or something. I don't know. He did all of that stuff, and
Is it Model UN?
yes, that.
Model
Yes, I
United
think it's Model
Nations. Yeah, I
UN.
did that too before.
Yeah. And then he eventually went to get his master's at Texas A&M, so their school of I don't even know what it is, but public policy or something. And then he's always been into like organizing and all that kind of stuff. And but coming out of that program, he had to go into the private sector because that's where like the jobs were. And so he worked in transfer pricing, which is it's essentially it's like a part of tax, but it's how companies manage their intercompany transactions across countries so that they're not cheating the system of tax. Um, but then, he found that that wasn't really the work that he was super passionate about and interested in. And then eventually now he works for the state government in Trenton, which for him, he finds the work more interesting. I don't think it's exactly what he wants to do forever, but it's definitely more in line with what his interests are. So I think the main thing is, getting little experiences and learning the most that you can about yourself and making small steps along the way, because you'll find as you get more experiences and you learn a little bit more, things will start to get clearer.
Exactly. Hopefully.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. All right, so let's talk a little bit about career. So my first gig out of school was at Ernst & Young in public accounting, where the main purpose of doing tax work within public accounting is to minimize the amount of tax that your clients pay and to fulfill their reporting requirements. So, the IRS, there's quarterly, annual requirements, and everyone has to do it. And so that was the sole purpose of the work that I was doing. One of the clients was Trump Plaza, or Trump's casinos in Atlantic City. So I think that was the most interesting one. So I would spend a few weeks a year at the casinos, just working and doing their tax work. About 1 year into this gig or this job, I was like, I'm not having fun. I'm not enjoying this. I had passed my CPA exam, which, as you know, takes like a lot of work. I went to school for 4.5 years, and I was like, this is not for me. So I went through like a time where I was like, I had to figure myself out. I was like, did I just waste 5 years of schooling? I don't know what I'm gonna do. I went through the process of applying to law school because I'm like, oh, maybe I'll go do law school and then figure that out. And along the way, I kind of discovered that consumer products and figuring out what makes people want to buy one brand versus another, even though the product is exactly the same, was like, I just got a huge interest in that. I'm like, Dasani water versus Poland Spring. At the end of the day, it's water, but you have a favorite one. And once I figured that out, then I was like, okay, I'm going to figure out a way to kind of get into that type of career. So as a first step, what I did was I found how to take the skills that I learned within tax, which was um, doing and analyzing tax statements for the purpose of doing tax returns, and applied it to analyzing the business's P&L in a few different roles at Johnson and Johnson, focusing in their consumer products division. So analyzing the P&L and the business is pretty much, it's at the core of running any consumer business, but it's understanding, how much we sell, what it costs to sell it, the selling and marketing expenses related to that, getting into like what the key drivers are of a business. And so while I was doing that for a couple of years, I also developed um, very strong relationships with people in marketing. So I would take side jobs that weren't a part of my day-to-day job, and I would help them. I would be like, hey, did you see this new insight? Hey, look at this. And I would pretty much just um, develop relationships with people in marketing and help them, um, while I was also going back to school to take some more marketing classes back at Rutgers. So that by the time I had a couple of years in finance, I was ready to talk to my boss and tell her that, hey, look, I want to move into marketing. Can I apply to some of the jobs over there? I just finished the marketing coursework, etc. So it took from so the first year at Ernst & Young, I figured out I hated my job. The second year at Ernst & Young, I figured out what I wanted to do. And then it took 2 more years after that of working in finance, going back to school, and doing some side projects to actually get into like what I wanted to do. So I think that was like a total of 4 years after graduating college that I kind of like figured out what it is that I wanted to do. And then I guess to explain a little bit about what that is, it's a part of marketing called brand management. And it's essentially like managing a brand or a business within a company and touching all aspects of the business. So this first strategic thinking is figuring out like an understanding of the land. I guess we should use an example. Can you guys tell me, like, let's talk about a product or a brand that you guys are passionate about? Can somebody just say one?
Amazon.
Okay. Amazon. All right, so let's use Amazon as an example. So Amazon is an e-commerce store. Let's make it super simple. That's what they do. They sell stuff through e-commerce. They have an app. Let's say I'm gonna say that I'm competing against Amazon because Amazon's number one. It'll make it more fun. So I am going to launch another e-commerce another e-commerce platform to compete with them. That's my job. I have to come up with the brand to do that. As some of the key questions that I need to answer is, what is it that consumers want in their e-commerce platform? Okay, they want very fast delivery for Amazon, like super fast. Like 2 days is that's like the benchmark. Next day would be game changer. What else do they want? They want to make sure that the transactions and the information that they provide to you is 100% secure. You're going to have your home address, your credit card, all of that stuff. The third one, they're going to want trusted products and brands, things that they buy a lot of and are used to. Because they're going to, in e-commerce, you're not able to experiment, like walking into a store and trying something new. And so if I was to focus on those 3 things, I'd be like, okay, we got to deliver faster than Amazon. We got to get trusted brands, and maybe if we can get if a trusted brand is releasing something new, maybe we can do it and get it ahead of Amazon so it's available there. And then we have to have top of the line security. So those would be like 3 key pillars of how I would launch a new brand. Then I also want to think about what Amazon does best and figure out what we can do better and what we can do best. Then, along with all of that stuff, you need to figure out the financials. How much are we if we're gonna deliver in less than 2 days, we need warehouses. How many warehouses? Where do we need them? How much are they gonna cost? Then you figure out, okay, how much product do we need to move through the system so that the fixed costs in the warehouses are paid for and covered. So then you start getting into like all of that stuff to make sure that it's a viable business. Step 2, or the part 2 that I have here, is called positioning statement. It's really, after you've answered all of those questions, you figure out your brand position. Like, what is it that your brand is, so that you can win in the marketplace. And it gets consolidated down into like one statement so that everyone in the organization, everyone that touches that brand knows what that brand stands for and how you're going to go to market. From that, then you create a brand plan. It's usually annually. And that plan is, what are you doing for the year? How much are you planning to sell? How are you investing the money that you have? Do you need more money? What are the issues and challenges that you see coming up that we need to think about as an organization? And then you come up with the execution of the strategy. So that means, like, for my new e-com store, I need to make sure that everybody knows that we're the fastest. So we're going to come up with an advertising campaign that communicates that. I want to make sure that everyone knows that we're trusted. So I'm going to put Norton antivirus security thing, I don't know, somewhere, so that they can, when they land on the page, they see it. So it's really making sure that the positioning statement and that the business fundamentals, they show up and they come through in an annual plan. And then that helps get management and the organization aligned to what is going to happen for the year. Then you get into execution of that plan. So actually making the TV commercials, making the digital assets, buying the media, executing them, going live. And then after that, you analyze the performance. Did it work? What didn't work? As you're doing it, you figure out, oh, this is working, so let's tweak it a little bit and let's focus more resources here. And then you just keep doing it. Every year, you keep getting a pulse and a read of what's happening in the marketplace, how your brand is doing versus the goals that you set out, and figuring out what are the things that you need to adjust and do to grow your business.
Hey, Joel.
Yeah.
We have a really good question. And the question is, how has this entire system been changed within the marketing field due to the coronavirus?
Yeah, so, I mean, we're still figuring it out, but it has changed, I mean, a lot, like from like this, like so one of the brands I work on is Avion, and we were sponsors of Coachella, which was supposed to happen April 10th and 11th. And it was like the first week of March, and we were still like planning Coachella. And we're like, oh yeah, are we gonna get this artist to perform? Are we gonna do this event? And then next thing you know, like everything is like closed. So, I mean, we've had to pivot. The main thing, so I think COVID has impacted every business a little differently. I'll tell you about how it's impacted ours and the type like how we've adjusted our work. So in the liquor industry, 20% of the sales come from restaurants and bars and nightclubs. So those are closed. So all of the plans that we were building, like for Cinco de Mayo, related to restaurants and bars and all that stuff, is like, okay, can't do them anymore. They're gone. Whatever we spent on is gone. Um, then we had to think about, okay, there's a community of customers that we serve that are severely impacted by this. Bartenders, restaurant owners, people that work in nightlife. What can we do as an organization to support that community? And so the brand that kind of took the first step for us was Jameson, because the dates lined up with St. Patrick's Day. And so Jameson came out with a campaign to support the bartender community and donate up to $500,000. So that was the first thing, is like, okay, a lot of programs are getting canceled. Let's figure out what they are, look at our budgets, what are the things that we need to get canceled, how much money are they costing, who are then thinking about our customers, how do we help support, this, our customers in this time, knowing that their business went from like on to like completely closed. And then after that, the rest, the 80% of our business that's sold in supermarkets and liquor stores and e-commerce, we started to think about how are consumers changing and what is the role that we can play in this change. Marketing, especially when you're thinking about how you approach consumers, is a lot about empathy. And so the first thing is like, how are people feeling? And so I created, like, for our Cinco de Mayo, like a matrix that was, because my boss at the time, she was like, what are we doing for Cinco de Mayo? We have to like, what are we going to do? We got to pivot. And to help the team plan, I thought it was best to like set up a matrix, because we needed to make some assumptions. Like, you're not going to do the same thing if everyone is very sad and nobody wants to hear from an alcohol brand. Like, if that is the situation, then as a brand, we shouldn't do anything. We should let people go through their experiences and not interrupt their days, and make sure that that the information that they're getting on social media and on TV is more about the crisis and more about taking care of themselves, and that we're not interfering with that. So that was sort of one scenario. Another scenario is people are in quarantine, but they're optimistic, and they're looking for brands to engage with them because they don't know how to spend their time, or they're bored. So then that was a different scenario. Then a third one was, okay, by Cinco de Mayo, everything's back to normal. So, I started to lay out those different scenarios and the different actions that we would take based off of these different scenarios. And so I think, now, we're going with the one that's in the middle, because consumer sentiment overall is, a lot of people they're in the house, they're attending Zoom parties, they're figuring out ways to interact with others. There's still uncertainty and people worried and stuff, but overall people are open to brands engaging with them in a way that's, of course, like respectable and not communicating in a way that's like how it was before, and so I think in all marketing, when any big change happens, it's all about having empathy for the consumers and having that real understanding of how they're feeling, what they're thinking, and changing and evolving your plans to figure out how you can add value based off of how they're feeling.
There's been a lot of commercials on TV with a lot of brands, and I'm sure everyone on this call has seen them, thanking first responders or thanking their employees for continuing to work during the virus. From your expert perspective, how does it look when someone like Amazon, who has nationwide protests in several different, warehouses across the country because of lack of PPE, yet they're airing a commercial that says thank you and highlighting, those very same employees that are, either being fired or are protesting outside of their warehouses. Like, do
Yeah.
you, like, from your expert perspective, like, was that like a good call or could they have done better?
Yeah, I mean, I so what I think is that if there's something like at the heart of your brand, like you need to be able to walk the talk. Like that's and that's during any time, especially now, like you have to walk the talk. If you're not walking the talk, then you're not going to win in the marketplace, because in today's world there is there's like complete transparency whether a company wants it or not. I think the good thing is that consumers are savvy, and in the information age everyone is able to share and understand and have knowledge like super fast. So, I think if at the heart of Amazon's promise is caring for their employees and they have issues that haven't been addressed, and they're investing in, advertising that's saying thank you employees, but not addressing those core issues, then I think it's a gap. It's a gap for them. I'm not super familiar with the details of it, but I think any company should seek to really walk the talk and make sure that they're living their promise and that they're not just talking about it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. So let's talk a little bit about. So here's some of my experiences in marketing. So these are the three that I had while at Johnson & Johnson. The first and one of my favorites was working on a Vino baby. So this was way back, when I wasn't married, I didn't have a child. Um, and so it was like a whole new world for me, like learning about motherhood and pregnancy and and the things that they care in that category, how involved they're in. And the one thing that I'm super proud of here was that I identified that at the end of the day, most moms, they believe that baby skin is sensitive. And Aveeno as a brand, people already trust it for being for delicate skin. And so all we had to do was really communicate something that people already believed about us, but making sure that they got the point that we're for all babies with sensitive skin. And I remember one of the ways, well, how you create advertising as a brand person is you write a brief. So you don't write scripts, you don't draw anything. You pretty much paint the problem for the creative people to solve it. And so the way that I painted the problem at that point in time was I put up a picture of penguins, and one of the penguins had like gray fur while the other ones had black fur. And it was to show the point that we are for every baby with sensitive skin. Even if you're a penguin baby with sensitive skin, we are for you. And so that inspired them to create this ad that had a lot of diverse babies, diverse parents. So even two dads, uh, interracial parent, lots of things, but really proving the point that the product and the brand is for babies with sensitive skin, irrespective of ethnicity or any types of backgrounds. And the brand has continued to grow for the last several years, while the other brand in the Johnson's portfolio, they've gone through like some significant challenges. Um, the second one was the first time that I kind of brought in my personal cultural background into work specific, where I did all of the Hispanic marketing for Vino. So for body lotions, face products, hair products, baby products, everything that was in Spanish, I was the one that like led the strategy for it. Um, and so that was super interesting because I got to like infuse things that I learned just through life, through interacting with my mom, just being in Dominican Republic, growing up in a Hispanic household, were things that helped me at work because there were insights that I gained from going through that experience. Even like knowing how my mom shops at the supermarket and how she makes her choices and how my aunt does this, like all of those things I had like an inside scoop on because it was a part of my life. The third piece was I spent some time working on Listerine and focused a lot of it working on whitening, where the thing that I discovered there was that we were very much focused in this healthy white gentle, which was focusing on the fact that a lot of whitening products they can hurt your enamel because if they take away enamel, the enamel that's underneath is what's white, not like cleaning it. Some whitening products like strips. Um, in when you look at all whitening products, one of the most sensitive is mouthwash because it just operates on the surface. So people already think that mouthwash is sensitive, but what they're looking for is effective mouthwash. So what I found was that we don't need to focus on telling them that we're gentle because mouthwashes are already gentle. They're concerned about strips and other products that can take away your enamel. So then we refocused on the most effective product, which was this one to the right, the Vibrant one, where it whitens teeth in 5 days. So that was more of a challenge of portfolio management and what is it that people cared about and figuring out how we could manage our portfolio to win in the market.
We have a question for you, Joel. So when you mentioned about how, hold on, let me read it. When you mentioned about how you guys survey or know what the public wants, how do you actually figure out what consumers are looking for? Is it through surveys? Is it like through third-party organizations? Like, is Johnson & Johnson actually doing, surveys themselves? Like, how do you gather that information so you know what people are looking for?
Yeah, so there's not like one answer. It can come from lots of different sources. That's so every consumer products company has a market research lead, which I have someone that's on our team that is dedicated to market. That is her full-time job. It's understanding the consumers. There are, here's how do I set it up? There's things that are done on a regular basis that give you insight into consumers on a regular basis. So I'll talk to you a little bit about some of those. And then there's things that are not done on a regular basis that are more project focused based on a particular business question or problem. So some of the ones that are ongoing include a point of sale data that we get from providers like Nielsen and IRI. So those are two of the main providers. And what that is every time something's scanned in a store, Walmart, CVS, Walgreens, they collect that data and they sell it to Nielsen, for example. Nielsen takes the data from all of the different stores and they put it into a system and they sell it to us. We buy access to that data. And then every single month we get reports like this brand is going up, this brand is going down. And all of those reports also include things like if brands were on promotions, if coupons were used. And then you can also like put, if you had advertising on and you line up sales and advertising, then you see, oh, when advertising was on, sales went up. So you get a pulse of how consumers are showing up in terms of like what they're buying. So that's one way. An additional way that Nielsen does it is through, they have a panel of people that they give them scanners, and the scanners are in their homes. And every time they buy something, they scan it. So every time they bring products and they scan it, and then that goes into Nielsen's system, and then Nielsen sells it to us. And then we're able to see what people are buying, what they have in their home, and how their behavior is changing. Another thing that we do on a recurring basis is a little bit more, it's less on buying and more on their mindset. And it's based off of essentially like a surveys, but it's not like random surveys, it's recurring, where we ask questions like, have you heard of this brand? Are you interested in buying it? What do you think about it? What are the top things that come to mind when you like, what do you associate this brand about? And that also happens on like a recurring basis. So if, for example, one of the, going back to the Aveeno baby, the number one thing I wanted people to associate that brand, it was with good for sensitive skin. Like if we do that, we're gonna win. So in advertising, that's what we would communicate. In that survey that would go out, one of the options was good for sensitive skin. So like then as you see that measure change over time, then you can see if what you're doing is working. So that's kind of like the stuff that happens on a regular ongoing basis. Then there's other stuff that is more project based, where I guess I'll talk a little bit about innovation. So right now, I'm working on creating a new tequila flavor. The way that you go about creating a new product or a new tequila flavor includes different levels of testing and consumer knowledge. The first, how we came up with like the territory, was by looking at some of those sales insights from before. We said, okay, this is a segment that's growing. We don't have that. Okay, what is that segment talking about? They're talking about being smooth, but they're still a white tequila. Because if you know about tequila, when you age it, it starts to get color, but some products age it, and they do something to the process, and then they take the color away. So it's like, okay, that sounds interesting. So then we took the recurring data, we have a hypothesis. Now we're gonna write up, this is the product that we're gonna launch, and this is what we're gonna communicate. And we essentially write a concept where if you're a consumer, you're gonna get one page, it's gonna show a picture and a description. And then you're gonna give us feedback. Would you buy it? Would you not? What do you like about it, etc. And then we learn about what people think, and then we adapt, or we make certain decisions based on it, and then we move forward. Eventually, we'll create liquid, we'll create the packaging, and we'll do some experimentation live, either in focus groups or in a bar setting, where people can actually taste it. They can touch the product, move things around, and then after that, after we get that feedback, then we'll continue to work on the plans to launch. So it's a combination of like recurring stuff, sales, numbers, data, quantitative, like surveys, qualitative groups of small people. It all depends on the project and the business problem that you're trying to answer.
I think it's so interesting that there's so much thought and effort and strategy put behind, everyday things that we purchase, even though as consumers, sometimes, you just mindlessly wander through Target or through Walmart and you're just like grabbing different things. you don't realize how much, like everything in front of you, how much, how much strategy and effort goes behind it.
Yeah, this it's a lot of work, and sometimes some of the work doesn't even like show up in the world because like sometimes things get canceled or like
Right.
different revisions and different things.
Yeah.
So one of the most satisfying things is when you actually like launch something and you see it in the store or like on TV. It's like whoa, like finally. Yeah.
I was so curious to know if anyone wants to come off mute and kind of just like share your mindset when you choose, like when you're wandering through a store, when you're looking for something, like what makes you choose something over, like one thing over something else. Before I have to pick on somebody for being quiet and for just IMing us.
I was
I have a
actually
question.
sorry, just
I'll
to
I'll
cut
ask
in.
a question.
Oh,
It's kind of. Oh, go ahead. Actually, go ahead, Saul. Do your thing.
I actually like realized this the other day because I had needed an aftershave. So of course, like with Corona going on and everything, I went on Amazon and like saw what they had. And I was like, okay, let me see the reviews. So at first, like I wanted to see what was kind of like doctor recommended, and then I wanted to see like of course like what it was made of. So I think like those same things attract me. Like when it comes to like that stuff, where it comes to like junk food, I think it just has to have like a certain type of look to it. I don't know why, but I feel like some of the best companies with junk food, they have the best marketing teams for it. I don't know why, but it always catch my eye.
Go ahead for your question, Spencer.
Sure. So I was wondering, because I like economics too, and to an extent, that's what I'm studying. So I'm doing international relations in, as well as an MBA in finance, and I realized where I wanted to make my impact within business is within marketing, to an extent, because I realized, how much influence marketers really do have because the economy moves through markets. So I was wondering if you had kind of figured out the same thing in your MBA program, going from econ and pre-CPA to being a marketer.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of so when I was at Ernst and Young, I discovered that the purpose of my work was really what I was not liking because the purpose of my work, which was doing tax, wasn't going to have an impact on the future of that business. So as I started to like, once I nailed that and I started to ask and figure out, okay, who is at the center of driving the work forward so that the business will succeed or will fail? And I want to go be at that center. So, and then for consumer products in particular, that's how the business operates because consumer products, um, at their core, there isn't so much to differentiate on besides the brand. Like the brand is at the core of how consumers um, pick and make decisions. So the marketer is at the center of driving that business forward. Because, just like Hassaud said, there's certain cues that the packaging gives you, and there's doctor recommended, and that's how the people are making decisions in that business. So marketing is the function that's in the middle of it. In other businesses, it might not be necessarily the case because it depends on what is it that is, who's the customer in that business and what impacts the customer. So in the other, so I think, for example, I don't know, if we take like the hotel industry, marketing within the hotel industry is more focused on communications, while at the core of that business is real estate. What are the locations? what are the long-term deals that we have? Are there new airports opening up? Um, there's a different sort of skill set that that type of business will require.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, so moving on to a couple more experiences. So after working at J&J, I decided to move to Anheuser-Busch to work in the beer industry. They were launching a new Mexican beer brand called Estrella Jalisco, and I've always been super interested in like launching brands from scratch and new products, and like how do what's the process of doing that. And it was a perfect combination of a new brand but in a big organization where it was still it wasn't as risky as working for a startup, but it was like you're starting a brand. So I got that role, and one of the most exciting things about it was I actually got a Guinness World Record Award for it was for during Cinco de Mayo 3 years ago for having the biggest loteria game. Loteria is a Mexican bingo game, so that was fun. So like, because I as a kid growing up, like, oh, Guinness World Records, Guinness World Record. So that was a cool experience, and it also continued to use some of my cultural background because a lot of the marketing was in Spanish because it's a Mexican beer. I spent a lot of time in California because that was our number one market. I started to learn more about the Mexican community because that was the main focus of the target. So that was fun. Then the next gig that I had was probably the funnest job I've had like ever, where I was heading up Presidente beer, which comes from the Dominican Republic in the U.S. And I was like a one-man show, just running that brand in the U.S. And because that brand comes from the Dominican Republic, all of the passion points associated with it were the same as mine, like music, baseball. So I got to go to the World Baseball Classic because we were sponsors. We had huge music festival that had all of these artists that you see here, which I was huge fans of. So it was like the perfect blend of what I like to do professionally and my personal life. It actually that time never ever really felt like work. So it was a ton of fun. Then coming out of that, I got like a huge promotion to work on Bud Light, which is the number one beer in the whole world, pretty much. But with that, I kind of learned that like sometimes on paper, what seems great and huge and a promotion isn't necessarily like what's going to make you happy. And so with that promotion came a ton of like work and life challenges. So work wise, I joined a team that just wasn't the right culture. It wasn't a culture where I felt that I could be my authentic self, as I mentioned before. In addition to that, um, I went through a time where I tore my Achilles. I had surgery. Um, we were pregnant with the baby, and there was like a lot of life things going on. And so all of those things combined, with also like some really big business challenges that Bud Light has had now for like 10 years, made it a very challenging experience. And looking back, it was like on paper, that was a huge job, huge promotion, all of the right things. But like I would have preferred to stay in Presidente, which is smaller. It doesn't look great as good on a resume, but it was like a lot of fun. So that's one of the lessons that I take away is that um, having like big names or anything like on paper isn't always necessarily the best thing for you. So I think it's always important to think about um, what it is that you care about and where you think you would be the most happiest in. And then last but not least, professional wise, is tequila. So about 8-9 months ago, I joined Pernod Ricard, and now I'm working on a couple of tequilas, Altos and Avion. Altos is a tequila that's started by Bartender, so that the one on the right is named Dre Masso with Action Bronson, who's in the middle. He's a rapper, has a show on Vice. It's kind of like more of the homey, bring it home and make some cocktails kind of brand. And then Avion, which is the one on the right with Cardi B's face on it, is more of the upscale, lifestyle, nightlife kind of brand. And so now I'm, spending my time creating programs for both of the brands. And then the last slide here, and then we can just continue talking about whatever you guys want to talk about, is just some thoughts on just the current situation. So I think some of the main things that everyone's feeling in one way or another is this level of uncertainty, lots of stress, financial health challenges. There's so many things to all kind of take in at once that it can be really daunting. The approach that I've kind of taken, and it's not easy, because like sometimes I wake up and I'm like just grumpy, and I'm like, why am I so grumpy? But what I've done is just try to focus on what I can control. So what are the things that I can do for me and my family's health, safety, and then in addition to that, like, what is it that I can create? Like, how can I use this time to do things that are just more of the things that I like, and that I can put more things into the world. Because, if I start to think about things that are outside of my control, then those are efforts that they kind of go to waste because I can't really do anything to change them. So a couple of the things that I've been doing in addition to like working is my mom, she's always loved to sew, and she worked at a fabric store, which is now closed for the time being, and she's kind of bored. So I was like, look, if you make some masks, I'll create you a shop. So now she has an Etsy shop. She sold a couple masks, and it's just a fun way to keep her active. And to just see her like, oh, I created this, and then us going through the process of taking pictures and putting them up. So that's one thing. And then the other is my wife and I were already working on launching a feminine care brand called Next 9 Months, and so we're continuing to make progress on that, and just having those little projects and putting work out there into the world. I found it like super helpful to kind of keep the mind engaged on positive things, and to make the time kind of go by in a good way.
Does anybody on the call want to share with us what they've been up to? Kind of how Joel just shared, he's been working on his brand with his wife, and he's been working on, getting his mom in an Etsy shop. So does anyone want to come off mute and share what you guys have been up to besides the schoolwork and attending all these Café con Joes?
I mean, I'll share, but I really haven't done really anything else besides like those two. Like, I've been doing a lot of schoolwork. I've been applying for some scholarships for like deadlines that are coming up soon. Yeah, just trying to finish out the semester and just grinding through the last, like few days just to kind of go into whatever this apparent summer is supposed to look like.
I have a question for you, Jalen. So I know that you were doing some work in a school, were you able to keep that, or did you have to stop doing that work?
So we had to stop going just because, well, anyone who wasn't a senior and their senior student teaching was pulled out of their student teaching placement just because of the situation. It was so unexpected. So in terms of like requirement hours, we're supposed to have 60 like observed hours there. But since we got pulled out like halfway through, they kind of made exceptions for people because most people we were just at like the halfway point. I was kind of extra, so I went extra days, so I ended up with 59 hours anyway. So to me, I kind of still got that full semester long experience from there. I do keep in touch with like the teacher that I was assigned to just to see like how things are going, how are my students doing, tell them I miss them, how are you doing, like in terms of just teaching, and then just for yourself, your family, things like that.
Thank you for sharing, Jalen. How are your students doing?
They're doing amazing. One of them is like a big concern, and I actually met her on my last day there. Her and her family had just come from Peru, like dead smack in the middle of like the school year. So I had only met her one day, and she didn't speak any English at all. She only spoke Spanish. So the teacher was kind of struggling with her. Thankfully, there's another student in the class who speaks both English and Spanish, so she was helping her out. But I was working with third grade students, so there's only so much that you should be able to expect from like a third grader. I don't want to put too much pressure on another student to help like myself and the other teacher out. So the teacher told me that like that one particular student and her family, it's kind of difficult to work with them just because she doesn't speak Spanish. So it's kind of hard in terms of communication and making sure, not only that work is being done to say that work is done, but like the students actually getting some kind of learning experience out of this entire situation.
Joel, I'm kind of picking on Jalen a little because Jalen, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't you start with a different major and then switch over to education?
Yeah, so I came into college starting as an accounting major,
Wow.
just because similar to like what you had said at the
Feel
beginning.
like there's a little similarity there.
Yeah, like similar to what you said at the beginning. It'll always be a job for you. You'll have some money. I wanted to not only have money for myself, but kind of help my family out because I have four younger siblings. So I wanted to help my family as much as possible. But within like 2 weeks of being in the program, having taken no accounting classes, only taken economics classes, I realized I hated business and it was not for me at all.
Yeah.
So I dropped the major. I was undecided for a semester. Kind of was just trying to figure things out, what to do. And thankfully, we have like a service learning program at the university that I had to get involved with, which I had no interest in initially getting involved with. But after going through that service learning experience, I found my passion for education, and I actually now work at that service learning center. So it's funny how it kind of all switched on me. Like I had no expectation of any of this having happened to me during college, and just complete opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, that's awesome. You're smart for figuring it out in 2 weeks.
I'm glad I did.
It took me like 5 years and like already leaving school, so that's good.
Yeah.
But I think the major theme that, and thank you, Jalen, for sharing, but, the major theme with you, Joel, was, it's okay to not have everything figured out right now. And it does take time, to figure out what you want to do. You go to college and you're 18 years old when you pick a major, or you pick it. I remember when I went to college, my mom used to tell me that I had to be a doctor. And I was actually accepted to Seton Hall University under the pre-med program. And after I flunked my science class, I realized that it was just not something where I wanted to be. But I think that, sometimes when you grow up within our culture, your parents drill education into you and they really try and push you towards fields that might not necessarily align, with where your passions are, and you kind of have to either go through it or, navigate it. And it's okay if you change your mind, and it's okay if you make a career change. And you, Joel, you shared, you loved your time at Presidente. And when you got that big promotion into Bud Light, it wasn't exactly, somewhere where you wanted to be, and you made the conscious choice of taking your career to where you wanted it to be. And, similar to you, Jalen, you didn't really expect much from that service project. And then you ended up falling completely in love with, education. And now, you're going to be a teacher one day. And, same with me. I was at a company for 5 years. And, after 5 years and being promoted and being one of the youngest, executives at that company, I was like, this is not where I want to be. And, it's up to all of us to kind of take charge in our lives and kind of, figure out where we need to be and guide ourselves there sometimes, with our mentors and with everyone who is around us, encouraging us along the way. Because, I know, Joel, you must have some mentors, in your life that have helped you too.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, to this day, like, I've had a ton. So actually still keep in touch with some of the people I worked with at Johnson and Johnson, and I set up like biannual, so like twice a year we talk to catch up, and I leverage and talk to people that have gone through different experiences every time I make like a big decision. So, before I took the Bud Light job, when I changed to tequilas, I start calling them up and I'm like, hey, I'm thinking about this, and what do you think? And they tell me what they think, and then all of them have different opinions, but at the end of the day, they help see me things through different perspectives, and it helps make me an informed decision. So yeah, I think definitely getting the point of view of different people and different mentors is always helpful.
Same. I've always gone to my mentors for everything before I took my first job, before, I accepted anything. When I made the decision last year to leave my organization, I called Denise, who, do you know Denise, Joel? She used to be the director of the Institute when I was a student. I called Denise. I called her, I remember it was the weekend of July 4th, and I was like, I hate my job and I need to leave. I was like, what do you think? And we talked for like hours. But that's what mentors are there for. They're there to be a sounding board for you when you have various life decisions to get through. But clearly it's 100% okay to change things up in your life.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I had to like discover in the whole process of career and everything is that as you grow up, and even as you go through college, there's a lot of times like a preconceived notion of what success looks like. And like, because when you're in school, it's like getting A's. Your report card is success. When you're in college and then looking forward at a career, people start think like the portrait of success is financial, and that's like what success is. And then you start to formulate your mind sort of against what those preconceived notions are. But in reality, through like your own experiences, you get to define what your own success is. And that's really what the true meaning should be. And then once I've discovered that, okay, this is what it means for me, and I don't need to feel like I need to fall into one of those pieces of what other people think success is, then it kind of opens you up to like, oh, okay, this is the path that I want to take.
100% agreed. Does anybody else want to come off mute and share their experiences and kind of figuring out what they want to do and how maybe their perspectives have changed during their time at Zine Hall?
I actually had a question. So working with such big companies, I don't want to just assume it, but of course, Super Bowl weekend, such a big thing, of course, like Super Bowl, known for its commercials. Did you ever work on a commercial or like how, if you did work on a Super Bowl commercial, how was the, I guess, intensity or like the mood in the room when you guys like saw it either come up or you guys had to like figure out an idea for it?
Yeah. So I didn't work on the Super Bowl for Bud Light, thankfully. Oh my God. But I did work on the World Cup, which is its own Super Bowl. sort of.
Right.
It's our sequel, Joel.
Yeah. So that was actually, yeah, actually, I can talk about that because I talked about other stuff on it. Let me, one of the things that we did, which was actually a lot of fun. This was like the the funnest part of it. Um, so we came up with an idea that if Mexico made it to the fifth game of the World Cup, that we would give California free beer. And we created this like whole campaign with the Dilly Dilly guy, and a new oracle that was able to predict stuff. And like she would predict every Mexico game, and she even predicted when Mexico beat Germany. Uh, and we created, it was like
Wow.
this tarot card concept where like we filmed her, like if you imagine this is a tarot card and you're filming me and she goes like this, and then the camera zooms in and all you see is like what the tarot card is, you don't see her, but then we're able to change what's on the tarot card like this without having to like reshoot her. So then we would have already reactions recorded, her going like this, everything recorded, and all we needed to change was the tarot card. So then, like, let's say Ronaldo had a hat trick at one point, for Portugal, and then we created a tarot card with the hat trick. And then every time we would see something cool, we would like create different pieces, and it looked like, oh man, you guys shot that, but no, it was already all like different reactions, different things. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was also stressful because when you're working on like a big piece of business like Bud Light, it's like billions of dollars and investors and everyone cares about it. There's like stress coming from all angles. So like to get to that type of idea, we had to go through rounds of creative reviews, present to the CMO, get his point of view. It's just like a lot. And then we had to plan for if Mexico actually got to the fifth game, how were we actually going to deliver and like get people beer? It was its own whole. So we had to have like the plan ready, and then like how do we let people know how it's going to happen? How do we celebrate? So we had like a full plan, and then during the game they were facing Brazil. We literally had a conference room set up with the whole team watching the game, watching the Twitter feed happen live. And it was stressful because people were like, "Oh, did you get to go to the World Cup?" I'm like, I didn't want to go to the World Cup because we were like living and breathing the World Cup like every single day, weekends. It was crazy, but it was fun though to see the work out there. I got to, film the commercials, which were a lot of fun. For the Super Bowl, it's even like more intense because the advertising costs even more. And I would just see some of my colleagues who worked on it. I'm like, I want no part because it's the stress level is crazy.
I can't even imagine figuring out how to get beer to every resident in California.
Yeah.
Thank God they lost the game.
Yeah.
Sal, do you want to share a little bit about, kind of like what you've been up to during the virus and any other insights?
Of course. So like, I guess I was also going to share about basically like how my journey at Seton Hall was. Originally went in as a bio major, and again first semester, because I did perfectly fine. I think I had like a 3.2 GPA in my first semester, but I just didn't have like the love for it. And I ultimately went to psychology, took one of like the classes to it showed me what I could do with it, and continued to be on the path where I'm at now to figure out that I want to be an occupational therapist. Just so through the stuff I've been through, but through this coronavirus, just a lot of homework. I'm in Texas. Just so everyone know, like I live in Texas. I'm from the border. So Texas, it seems like they're about to reopen retail as of Friday, and I work at Foot Locker, so I might actually have something to do I don't work. I want to be open. I'd rather it's just how it is. I'm more just trying to stay healthy and spending as much time as I can with my parents. So.
Nice, that's good. It sounds like you're staying busy, and once the stores open up, you'll keep staying busy. Stay safe while you go back out there, and yeah, keep staying busy doing positive things, because the more stuff you do, like, then the more work you put out there, whether it's just educating yourself in whatever your interests are in your field, or actually doing any type of work, I think the better, because all of that accumulates over time, and you'll just become better for it.
Right, exactly.
Anyone else want to share? Before we let Joel, we've kept you 34 extra minutes. Thank you so much. But before we let Joel give us his final thoughts.
I can actually use a little bit of, hello, I don't know if you can see me. Oh, there I am. So my mom is a kindergarten teacher in the inner city, and we have been working on getting literacy to all those students. I'm a Gold Award Girl Scout, so my project when I was in high school was a literacy event, and now we've changed it where we're working with the underprivileged and more impoverished families, and we're actually giving them food bags. Like, I go to Costco and like bulk buy more than normal, and then give them. But I'm trying to find a way to advertise it to see if other people have like donations and what someone would recommend in getting the word out. I'm currently getting ready to talk to Girl Scouts of Connecticut to see if they're going to let me and alumni sell cookies, because they have a whole bunch of unsold cookies. And if I can use that money for that, but we haven't finalized this yet.
Wow, that's awesome work that you guys are doing. I think to think about like how you could get the word out more, I think you might want to start to think about that community that you're serving, that group of people. Like, understand who they are and who the community is of people around them that could be interested in helping them, or that have some sort of connection or affiliation to them, and then kind of take it from there. Because I think where you could find a sweet spot is in, you have a group of people that are in need. And then once you can find the group of people that want to help that group of people that are in need, then that's sort of the sweet spot. So I don't know, exactly like what community it is or how you could take those steps. But I think if you go and just ask yourself some questions about what that community is, and what's surrounded by them, what are people that are connected to it, then that might be able to help you. Because I think I've never worked in like the public space before, and leading community efforts. But when I'm thinking about like this current situation that we're in, there's lots and lots of communities in need, and the direct, like, where a person starts to help first is like their first layer in, So like for me, for example, I called my grandma. I was talking to my grandma who's still in Dominican Republic, and I'm asking her questions like, hey, like, I know you're doing okay, but how's your community doing? Like, what's going on around there? Are people eating? How are they getting their food? And she started telling me how the government's been sending out like food cards, and like she's been like actually using her food card for other people, and they're kind of like figuring it out as a community. But my first inclination was like, okay, what are the things that are kind of within my realm that I can go reach out to and start to make some of those connections. So I think if you could help make that connection for people that are surrounding that community that you're serving, then I think that will be the easiest way for you to unlock and get some more opportunity and some more help from people that are naturally interested in it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I know, Juliet, when I was at American Cancer Society, we did a lot of campaigns, like grassroots campaigns, and we had to go in and kind of study every community, like Joelle said, but you can always start with where do they shop? What are their local stores look like? You know, what do the local businesses look like? Are they even functioning right now? How would you get in contact with them? You know, like where do they worship? For students, like, you know, what schools do they go to? Are you able to access the teachers via online? Like, those are the kinds of questions we would ask ourselves when we would go into communities in need and we needed to either, you know, let them know the services that we had or let them know that these were things available to them because they're kind of looking for that, you know. They all talk to, like, when you're a close-knit community like Joel's grandmother, like, you know, they all talk to each other. You all know what's going on in your block. And when one person knows about it, they're more likely to be like, hey, if you need something, you can actually go here and get it.
Yeah, but I definitely think there is an opportunity for like making it easier for people to know how they can help. So even, you know, if the people know how they can get help, that's one thing. But if your challenge is getting other people to chip in and help, that's another one. Which I think my wife brought up last week. She's like, "What's going on in our city? Like, city doesn't have anything posted. Like, you know." So even like connecting with the city, they have a website. You know, if there's people that are intrinsically linked to the city because they grew up there, they have roots there, whatever the case may be, well, let's let the city know that, look, if there's people that are reaching out to you that want to help your city, here's one way to do it. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. That's all awesome work that you guys are doing.
Thank you for consulting, Joel.
Yeah.
We'll send you advertising for your approval.
Yeah, for sure.
And thank you, Juliet, for asking. All right. Does anyone else want to come off mute? You know, Joelle, I think we're good on questions on our end. I think this has been a wonderful conversation. So, you know, we've learned a lot from you today, and I feel like all of us got a little marketing session over here, learning about, you know, how our behaviors are tracked and looked at and measured, you know, by the companies that we love. But I would just love to hear, you know, your final thoughts and kind of like your message to the students and, you know, next steps.
Yeah. Thank you guys for having me. I just say, you know, right now times are super different. There's a lot of stress, a lot of uncertainty going on, and I just say to, you know, stay positive and keep making, you know, whatever progress you can make on what your ambitions are, personally and professionally, and over time they'll add up and you'll get to where you want to be, and to, you know, stay focused on whatever it is that you're dedicating yourself to, and to know that, you know, if you don't have all the right answers today, that they'll come with time, because as you saw by my experience, I haven't had all the right answers, and fortunately along the way, you know, things have worked out, but it's definitely okay to not have everything figured out right now.
It is definitely okay, and thank you, Joel, for sharing your journey. And thank you to everyone for giving your input and asking questions and listening to everything Joel has to offer. And Joel, if anyone wants to connect with you after the phone call, where can we find you?
Yeah, so LinkedIn, and you have my email. You can give them my email. Yeah, I think those are the easiest ways to start, and, you know, definitely open to if anyone wants to have another conversation or has more questions or anything. Definitely open to that.
Awesome. So we will definitely share your LinkedIn profile with the students to see if they want to connect with you. I know we've had a couple of guests who have been able to connect with the students outside of, outside of these sessions. So thank you so much for, offering up your time and your generosity. We really appreciate it. And we have learned so, so much. And, to the students, make sure you keep charging forward. And we will see you all next time on our next Café con Joe session. Thank you so much, Joel. We so appreciate it. Have a good day, everybody. Bye.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank
Have a nice
you.
day.